Recording. All right. And again, let me say welcome everybody to this Knowledge Expert event. We're doing MVP meetups. And today we have Stephen Bell. And this is recorded and it will be available in the link that I provided in the chat. So let's go, Stephen, take it away.
Hello, everybody. On the MVP meetup for Flow Designer versus Workflows. My name is Steve Bell, and I am a senior architect at Accenture in the ServiceNow practice. My areas of expertise are having to do with CMDB, scripting, Flow Designer, Integration Hub, everything ITOM-ish basically, and ITSM. So I cover the complete gamut of that area. I've been doing it for almost 10 years now. So we will be covering these things, which is what would parity be inside of workflows versus Flow Designer, what are the pros and cons of both, and then thoughts on migration from workflows to Flow Designer. So this is me. I am MVP, 5-year MVP. I do a lot of contributions to Ask the Expert, and I also do a significant number of articles. I am a senior instructor for Accenture, and I'm also a product developer. So that's me. All right, so what about Flow Designer versus workflow? So workflows, we'll start with that. They're absolutely ubiquitous. They're everywhere. Everyone works with workflows all the time. Service Catalog, until just with the Orlando release, was actually an add-in in order to get Flow Designer capability. With Orlando, it's now installed out of the box. But workflows have a gigantic installation base. They're just amazingly large as far as installing and the investment many companies have put into them. Large number of experienced developers sitting out there. There are quite a few examples sitting out on in the community, and people have put together a lot of things in a lot of places. You can find workflows just about anywhere. They are long-term. They've been around since before 2012. So it's, there's just no problem finding someone who can actually do workflows. They're simple enough that you can pick it up pretty quick. And you have a couple extra things, which are the bullets on the end, which we'll get to here in a moment, that they have over the top of Flow Designer right now. Downside, not easily testable inside of the workflow creator. And you have to set to the global table in order to even test them internally. And it takes a little bit of training to really get a good feel for how all that works. So, okay. There is an orchestration training class that gives you a very in-depth workflow and orchestration ability. And this has been going on for a very long time. I've taught it pretty much since it rolled out. And there is a, a nice in-depth on this that gives you a good feel for the workflows, more advanced capabilities. What's really interesting is that they're still teaching this. So workflows and orchestration are still taught, and you can still take classes in it, even with Orlando release. Downside, things like orchestration are not available anymore as a separate sale. They're incorporated in as part of the installation for Integration Hub. So it isn't segregated anymore. They actually are selling them as a part of a suite. So these last two, like I said, I'll get to here in a minute. Let's go to Flow Designers. And so what is the difference here? There is no integration path. We'll talk more about that in a second. There is such a huge workflow installation base that Flow Designer, is one of those things. If you want to move to it, you really have to start fresh, and there really isn't anything there as far as migration path. So you can't push a magic button and have your workflow turn itself into a flow designer flow. There's not a lot of people trained in this stuff out there right now. I've done a series of videos on them to help alleviate some of that pain, but there's a lot of people who are still messing around with them, trying to understand how it works and how it all fits together and how you use all of it. There is some self-paced training out there for Flow Designer micro certification, which is very useful. And by the way, I highly recommend it. It's free. So just go out to the Now Learning site. There is no official class for it. You have Flow Designer and Integration Hub micro-certs with self-paced training, and that's it, all of it. So unlike with orchestration, there is no Integration Hub with the most commonly used spokes type training available yet. That may come, we'll see. I love the no-code solution capability of Flow Designer, but again, it's, if you want to do anything complex, you end up having to create your own custom actions and go from there. So very small number of examples available right now on everything. Docs does not cover a good number of examples. There are a couple things in the developer site, and of course with the hands-on training you get a handful, but there's nothing as far as anywhere close to the 10 years worth of workflows we got. So it's going to take some time to build that up, but because of the small number of examples, a lot of people are asking for help, and it slows down the development time and the rollout, obviously. It's interesting that in the micro-cert self-paced training, the ServiceNow recommends that if you can't do it in Flow Designer or Integration Hub, do it in workflows. And I'm sorry, if you can't do it in Flow Designer flows and Integration Hub, then do it in workflows and orchestration. And that's actually a slide in the deck. I love the testing capabilities inside of Flow Designer, but they're incomplete. And what that means is that if you go to some of the options inside of the Flow Designer testing tool for results, they're blank. And it'd be nice if that stuff started working, but there are pieces that are just not complete yet inside of Flow Designer. With Orlando, they filled in a few more of the blanks, but not all of them yet. But it's good enough that I feel like it's much more advanced in capabilities than workflows. It just doesn't handle certain things that workflows does, and we need that parity. All right, so what do we got? All right, I like the no-code solutions in Flow Designer. Very nice. I love the pills. The downsides are they both require serious training to master. So you really need to go through a tremendous amount of work. Even with all of the stuff that's available with Flow Designer and Integration Hub right now to play around with, it still takes some time to understand it and get your feet on the ground with it. Workflows have a scratchpad variable. Now, with the advent of Orlando, we've got dynamic outputs capability, but that's with Enterprise Integration Hub and doesn't really come out of the box with Flow Designer. So having this dynamic object capability inside Flow Designer is a must. And when they released what they did for Integration Hub this round, it looks really great. It looks exactly like what we want, but it's only available if you buy the most expensive piece of Integration Hub. So workflow loopbacks, not available at all inside of Flow Designer. So this is a big deal right here. By loopbacks, what I'm talking about, let me demo real quick, is you have something like this, where you have the capability of doing a test, running the script, a script or another activity or whatever, and then looping back to do a check again. All right, stop that, on the next time around. So it's possible to do this looping. It's possible to loop back to previous steps and be able to do it by simply, creating a connection to that particular step. So boom, I'm done. I can begin testing by whacking on a button, which would be a bad idea because initializing is going to cause this infinite loop if I do that. And then testing in here is kind of so-so. I mean, I've got to set up on the global table. Oh, I'm not logged in. It figures. Now I just lost my nice little. All right. So enough of that nonsense, but you get the idea. Being able to go back to a previous step is a huge deal, and you can't do that inside Flow Designer. All right. Finally, is the with the data pills, you don't have a JSON or non-glide record object capability except for through that dynamic object. And again, that's only available for, in some cases, inside of the enterprise version of Integration Hub. Deployment is the same for both. So in update sets or scoped applications, deployment works just great. So it, there's no real difference here. All right. So, here's some thoughts on this. I would like to open this up for some discussion. And essentially, what do we get here? We want to be able to move from workflow to Flow Designer, right? And we want to be able to, ultimately, it'd be nice to have some sort of migration path tool that would get us from point A to point B. But since we don't have parity and there's enough difference between the tools, this is not really possible, I don't think. I've analyzed it, trying to decide whether or not I could build myself a tool. It would not be easy to do. It'd be like writing a language parser almost, because it's significantly different in some areas. And I would have to actually analyze that stuff and be able to iteratively go across the design of the workflow and then be able to say, okay, this is one of these, and be able to do things like the loopbacks somehow. Loopbacks can be done in a for loop type structure, but it takes thoughtful planning to really get that nailed down. And for loops require a fixed value. So I can't do like workflow scratchpad for loops. You can actually make those dynamic. You could probably get away with something like that to a degree, but it would require some serious work, and you really need the dynamic objects for it. And then, smaller workflows may be movable as far as translating them into Flow Designer, even no code. And I've done some of this, but the large ones, it's just nasty. So it's almost better to start over. If you've got to really move something from one to the other, and there's no real good reason to, if it's working fine in orchestration or flow workflows, there's no real reason to rebuild it in Flow Designer. New projects look at doing them in Flow Designer unless something rears its ugly head that can't do inside Flow Designer, in which case just fall back to workflows. And that's about it. So let's open up for discussion here. Anyone have any questions they'd like to ask me, or anything they'd like to throw out there onto the floor?
Yeah, make sure you open your chat there, because we had one question that was from the community. Will workflow be taken away in upcoming updates?
No,
I don't think so.
No.
And
no.
then Thea has one on.
Yeah, they take. First off, there's literally millions and millions of dollars installed on, have been spent on workflows by companies all over the world. And I would hazard a guess is, it's hundreds of millions of bucks have been poured into it with people's time and effort, and even additional licensing with orchestration. So ServiceNow can't touch that, not for a long, long time. It has they have to have the compatibility with each release, and they can't shave that compatibility out without major screening from big partners. So big partners, big customers, everything else. Workflows and orchestration are here to stay for a while, until you can push a magic button and have it transliterate one into the other. If it could do that, I think workflow and orchestration's days would be seriously numbered. Now, on the other side, ServiceNow is not supporting new materials into those tools. So orchestration and workflows aren't having money sunk into them to give them new capability. If you want that new capability, you go to the new tool suite, which is, Flow Designer and Integration Hub. Are there known gotchas and or limitations of Flow Designer and scoped applications? None that I've run into, Nia. I have done some deployment work with them, and they look pretty good. I really haven't seen anything leap out and bite me, and I do quite a bit of work with this. I just built a tool for our own internal use, and it's a pretty good sized tool. Works a lot with a lot of different components, both with Integration Hub components and with Flow Designer components. I built a lot of my own stuff too, as far as new activities, and it all deploys beautifully inside scoped applications. Lynn, I have multiple catalog items that use the same workflow. Does that concept exist with Flow Designer? Yes. It with prior to Orlando, Lynn, you have to install the plugin for Flow Designer support and Service Catalog. With Orlando, it's out of the box, and it's available on the Service Catalog item screen, on the form. With New York, it's not there out of the box. After installation, you'll see it, and it works exactly the same as it does for workflows. It will not let you pick both. So you can't have a workflow and a Flow Designer flow. You have to pick one or the other. But you can have multiple Service Catalog items pointing at the same Flow Designer flow. Lance, is it best practice to use REST messages within an action or connection and credential aliases? All right, let me list a couple of things here. One, with the old workflows, you could do REST calls from things like script includes. Since ServiceNow redid the paradigm and consolidated the licensing for both Flow Designer and workflows, you can't get away with that anymore. It doesn't let you do that. So in that regard, that's now forbidden, and if you try it, you'll actually see a message in the logs. Now, where am I going with this? Okay, so I worked with REST messages, which are Integration Hub, and you have to have Integration Hub to make them work. And you can put them inside of scripted actions, or you can put them down into script includes, and they'll work great. But you have to have Integration Hub installed, in order to have that functionality. Connection and credential aliases, yeah, yeah. With flows, life is different. Things have changed. The licensing is a little more complex because it's transactional licensing, and highly recommend going and doing the platform micro-cert to learn some things about that. Better yet, go do the hands-on training to get the micro-certs for Flow Designer Integration Hub, and it will really fill in a lot of blanks for you. Karen, I am a process owner hoping to leverage Flow Designer to some simple stuff. Can you dot walk in the data pills? Absolutely. All right, so there's two types of flows, and if you go watch my videos I get into that kind of nauseating detail after a while. But anyway, I show that you can walk into glide records, and you can also walk into complex objects. The side where you get into trouble and you can't dot walk into them is any sort of JSON objects. So this is part of that dynamic object stuff that I've been wanting for a while. If you have a JSON object that you create specially in it and you feed it back out of your scripted action, then it will be available to you, but you have to use another scripted action to tear it apart and get into it. So dot walking objects that have been created is not available to us right yet. Here, let me show you something, because I was playing around with this, and you know, I bet you this, hold on a minute, I'm going to refresh, log back into my instance and show you an example I have. So it's a good question. And it has a very interesting side effect on it. All right, so what I did is I was playing around with trying to get dynamic objects to work without having to work with REST connectivity, which appears to be its limitation. In the outputs on this stuff, this is a JSON object, but notice there's no expandability to it. And this is a fallback or a problem, a failure inside of inside workflows right now, Flow Designer. This works fine inside workflows. So I can, actually dot walk into the object to some degree if I have it available to me over on the workflow side, but I can't touch it here. If I would like this to be something I could expand out and drop down. Let's see if I got a good one here I can show you. I think this is one. So no, that's still that's a subflow. I want a flow designer flow. Yeah, here we go. Action on incident change.
Just to check in with you, we've got quite a number of questions as well. So just,
yeah, I know this is a hot topic.
That's fine.
Yeah. All right. Here's a dot walk. Here's an array dot object. Here's another one, incident record, and you can see I can dot walk into it, and it's just basically walking into the tree of data pills. And this capability is there for glide records. It's there for certain types of objects like array objects. I can go in and play around with things that I've created. This has to be done, carefully, obviously, but it's got some capabilities to it that I'm happier with in Orlando. But you get the idea. You can do some pretty cool stuff. All right. Sure. Let's see here. Will we be getting reference of Flow Designer on tables directly rather than checking Designer? I'm not sure. I think you still have to go in through Designer if I understand your question right. And I don't know. I don't think we're getting the capability outside to view in. It's not contextual in the same way that workflows are. Wesley, we are looking to start using the Flow Designer as opposed to workflows for future service catalog items. Do you think we'll run into limitations in switching over to Flow Designer? Only the ones that I've bumped into so far that I showed you. The rest of it is a training issue, usually on having to think differently on how Flow Designer works compared to workflows. So if you end up doing complex work with scripts, you're going to have to kind of understand how it all fits together, how things flow through your scripted action, and being able to utilize that when it's back out on the flow. Also, how to trigger flows and the best ways of doing that. They have a mechanism called a subflow. It is not, it is a poor wording for the name. There's flows which work with record sets, so glide records. And then there's subflows, which allow you to pass in what you want. So you can actually throw a piece of JSON at a subflow as an input to the subflow rather than having it force you to glide records like in a flow. So there are some things you'll have to take into account that are similar but not the same as workflows. So it's a retraining thing for most of it. Let's see, Lisa Hemshakar, why cannot Flow Designer and Integration Hub be a single tool? Well, it's the same paradigm that workflows and orchestration are. Workflows are part of the entire out of the box instance when you first purchase the product, the license for your platform. With orchestration, what you're getting is a tool suite that goes on top of workflows. And it has a bunch of new tools that go with it, and it is considered a separate product that has workflows as its engine. So think of it as a set of serious enhancements or specific enhancements that have special support behind them. So ServiceNow actually has a support team that supports orchestration, maintenance, and also just help desk type stuff. All right. Same kind of thing goes for Integration Hub, only multiply it times 100. Integration Hub has tremendous number of spokes, both supplied by ServiceNow and also by third-party teams. Some of those spokes even cost money to cover creation costs and maintenance and support, and plus, profit. But it costs a lot of money to build a spoke, and it costs a lot of money to just have Integration Hub present with its out-of-the-box components. So Integration Hub is very similar in licensing-wise to orchestration, and it's the reason why you pay for it. Shane, just looking for your opinion. Do you want ServiceNow to improve workflow or focus on Flow Designer? I want them to focus on Flow Designer. I want to get these little things out of the way so that I can get off of workflows. Flow Designer is more advanced in its testing capability. It's more advanced in its overall capabilities. The actions are more flexible in my book. I love the pills. So the pill paradigm beats the socks off of the old workflow data bus paradigm. And it's simpler to use. It's simpler to visualize in many ways. I would like more flexibility with the tool. Right now, it's very rigid in the way it's set up because of things like the loopback problem. So I want to see more on the Flow Designer side, and I would like to see ultimately, I'd like to be able to push a button and have it change my workflow into an Integration Hub. One way getting me off of workflows altogether would be great, or Flow Designer. Chad, hello. If you used to do the following in parallel with if check, is it possible to go back and process portion after parallel action has run? In workflows, yes. In the Flow Designer, it's possible, but it is, and you can subflow out and have parallel operation on subflows. Very similar to what you can do inside of workflows. You cannot loop back when you get out of those. If you've got a check there, you can't go back to where you were. You have to set up kind of a, there's a do loop that you can set up, and it has to be thought out carefully, but it doesn't work the same way as workflows. So I'm not super happy with my condition capability inside of Flow Designer yet. Doesn't give me the same flexibility, and I really would like that. Hemshkar, what is thought process behind moving toward Flow Designer Integration Hub? Again, it's much more advanced. Integration Hub, significantly more advanced. The development teams, both inside ServiceNow and outside ServiceNow, the stuff you can get from the store, allow for integration of significantly more products out there. And it's much, much nicer to get at it. Well, let's see, this is gonna have to be the last question. We are at the bottom of the hour. I don't know how much time I've got, Lisa.
Well, we did schedule only for 30 minutes.
Okay, I thought so.
You have the time, I do, but maybe our guests do not. But again,
Sure.
This is being recorded, so.
Okay, I'll hit this last question then. We are looking to start using the Flow Designer as opposed to workflows for future service catalog items. You think we'll run into limitations in switching over? Yeah, basically, as I was saying, to someone had a similar question further up, yeah, there can be some problems there, especially if you're trying to use a dynamic object. There isn't anything like that over in the Flow Designer Integration Hub world. I have built things that are pretty close. It is possible to get very close to an actual dynamic object. It's just that it's not shown properly in the tool when the pills are displayed for the flow itself. So when you're working with the scripted actions, you can get pretty good with them. But then feeding those to an out of the box action it's a real pain. You have to set up individual variables for what you want to do, and then you can drag those variables over and drop them into the out of the box. I may do a demo of this in a later Ask the Expert session, but that's a major drawback to me with the Flow Designer / Integration Hub world. So yeah, there are some things that you can run into that could be showstoppers.
I think Jenny still had a question. And just as a quick reminder, maybe some people do not know what they Ask the Expert events. Those are the events that experts like Stephen Bell put on with me on the community. And so if you do need to find them, they're under community events. But I think there was still a question from Jenny.
Yeah, I'll answer her question. Jenny, the thing about your question is I'm a huge fan of the studio and deployment from the studio. I honestly, my preference is to build it as a scoped application and deploy it through the studio, but it depends on what you're doing. So if I'm releasing global and I'm only doing global, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put it into studio. It'd be better just sticking an update set and deploy it. You have to, it works just like orchestration in that regard, or, you know, workflows. You have to publish your flow in order to get it to show up in your update set and be able to deploy it. But beyond that, you know, it's my preference is to use the new deployment paradigm that's available in the studio. I prefer it. The recommended practice for reviewing the customer updates for flows. And we're just developing that, believe it or not, ourselves. I've got some best practices I've developed for our North American ServiceNow practice that I'm going to be implementing here real soon. Essentially, it is review of scripts that are part of our code review process. The things I look at are the scripted actions and how it holds to our actual paradigm for code reviews, because we have a standard that we utilize. And then also the any code that ties into it will fall into the normal code review process. As far as building out the Flow Designer flow, not really. Variable naming practices, but everything that's out of the box, it's pretty straightforward. So it really falls into any customizations you do, rather than just having any best practices from Flow Designer itself. It's not a flexible tool in the way that orchestration and workflows are. It just is not. Okay, so major takeaways. There are still some serious parity issues. We have to be careful in taking a workflow over to Flow Designer, and it requires serious thought to do so, and it may not be possible. It's also a best practice, probably in my book anyway, to start brand new, clean when you're going to the next level of things. I've got a couple of links that we'll be posting with this deck, and you can these yourself. They're pretty good. And that's all I had. Thank you everyone for your time.